All right, we're jumping into eternal conscious torment. Not literally. Hopefully, the this lecture will seem short and sweet. But we will be discussing the doctrine, the viewpoint on hell called eternal conscious torment. So, for those who hold to eternal conscious torment, they're largely going to see the purpose of hell in a certain way. They're going to see it as that what God is really trying to do with hell is to punish sinners forever. Right, so one might sort of think of hell in terms of prison, right? What is prison for? Is it about punishment? Is it about removal from society? Is it about reformation? So you can kind of make some comparisons here and sort of think about what are we trying to do? Like if we put someone in jail or in prison, if you think of hell as kind of a prison. While the person who believes in eternal conscious torment would say, well, God is ultimately trying to give these people their just deserts, and that's the purpose of it primarily. The argument that you're going to hear from many of those who hold to eternal conscious torment is that a sin against an infinitely righteous and holy God deserves an eternal punishment. So if there's an end to the punishment, then you're not really giving God his due. You're not sort of respecting and appreciating who he is and his nature and his goodness. And so they might sort of make an argument like, even in our own court system, crimes against certain people carry heavier weight or heavier punishments, right? A threat against the local mayor will be treated differently than a threat against the president of the United States. Or a crime against a child will be treated differently than a crime against an adult. So they would sort of argue because God is so good, there has to be significant weight, significant punishment when we disobey him or dishonor him in some way. And some of the key passages, and we'll be getting into these in a little bit. But if you want to jot these down, you're welcome to, as they're up on your screen. Although it looks like my face is covering a little bit, so I'll tell you what I'm covering: Revelation 14:9 through 11, and Matthew 25:41, and also verse 46. You can read that whole section, but those are the most important verses there. So let's look at a couple passages here. Revelation 14:9 through 11. If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy lambs and in the presence of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night, those who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. And so, Revelation is interpreted differently by different types of Christians, but largely there is this sort of focus on kind of final judgment, final justice, however you kind of cut up the pieces and parts. But ultimately this punishment is described as one where the smoke of the torment goes up forever and ever, and there's no rest day and night. That sort of sounds like eternal conscious torment. You got to give it to him, right? So Revelation 20 verse 10 is another. The devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also. You don't have to worry about them right now. We're not focusing on dissecting Revelation, but the devil, we'll focus on him. Devil is thrown in the lake of fire, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So that also sounds a lot like eternal conscious torment, right? Mark 9:43, verse 44, this is Jesus talking. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than having your two hands to go into hell, into the unquenchable fire, where their worm does not die, and the fire is not quenched. And in the translation I'm using there, it's the New American Standard Bible. You'll notice there's some capital letters. That's because Jesus is quoting from Isaiah 66, if I'm not mistaken, but also sounds a good deal like eternal conscious torment. Okay, one more. Matthew 25:41 and also verse 46. Then he will also say to those on his left, depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire, which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. There's an additional argument that you'll often hear from ECT folks. They'll say, well, this is the traditional view that the vast majority of Christians have held throughout church history, so we should give it the benefit of the doubt. So Protestants in particular are going to be inclined to doubt some things that are traditional. Obviously, they broke apart from the Roman Catholic Church and got rid of certain ideas that they thought were, even though they acknowledged they were traditional, they didn't see them as biblical. But even Protestants would say, well, okay, technically tradition and history or, all this stuff can be off, but nevertheless, we should give it the benefit of the doubt. It has weight. So this should be kind of our starting assumption, the eternal conscious torment view. You may be familiar with kind of a softer version of eternal conscious torment, which sometimes gets described as eternal separation. And I would distinguish this one from the traditional view because, while I like to read church history and that kind of thing, I could be mistaken, I guess, in saying this, but it seems to me that eternal separation is a largely modern viewpoint. If you read, church fathers and medieval Christians, not that they never use separation language, but really that punishing aspect is so central. And the eternal separation view is doing something a little bit different. It's really kind of not centering the punishment quite as much. And so, and the biblical language that they're going to sort of follow here is like Matthew 7:23, where Jesus describes this kind of final judgment day scene, and sinners are told to depart from God. And there's also this language in 2 Thessalonians 1:9 about the damned being punished. There's a Greek word here, apa. So that these people are punished apa the presence of God. So what does that mean? The Greek word can mean from, and it can mean away from. And those two things really say different things, right? So are they being punished away from the presence of God, or are they being punished from the presence of God? That God's presence is destructive or punishing or whatever. And so, that passage we looked at in Revelation, which describes being punished in the presence of the Lamb, would seem to contradict the reading of 2 Thessalonians 1:9, that it's describing being away from the presence of God. But nevertheless, it is a key verse that those who are holding to the separation viewpoint are going to point to. And so, like I said, I don't necessarily see it as the traditional view that like eternal conscious torment is, but it is much closer to eternal conscious torment than conditionalism or universal restoration. And I think that's partly why it's popular. Those who maybe want to soften eternal conscious torment a little bit, but they still want to sort of show deference to tradition, will be very comfortable, I think, in this eternal separation viewpoint. They don't want to go into annihilation or universalism, but they're a little squeamish about eternal conscious torment, so they land here. And maybe I'm psychologizing a little bit, but I have not, maybe to put my cards on the table a little bit, I have not been super impressed with this particular viewpoint. I think it's kind of new, and I don't think the biblical arguments are very strong.